Well, a very good afternoon, and thanks for clicking on to the Sunday edition of Vogan's North American Outlook. We have got some chilly air coming down into the upper Midwest. That will be progressing across the Northeast over the next few days. So, more chill coming into the Great Lakes and the Northeast region of the country. Heat building over the West. That will be spreading across the Plain States over the next several days. And through the second half of this week, we are going to see more warmth building westwards, or should I say eastwards. But around this time last week, we were talking about Tropical Storm Manyi over the West Pacific. That brought wind, rain, mudslides, and record-breaking rainfall across parts of Japan last week. And generally, the rule is that with a recurving typhoon, that system pushed north and eventually northeastwards over the West Pacific. And generally, the rule of thumb is that not always, but quite often, you have a trough downwind over the eastern half of North America in the 6 to 10 day period. And lo and behold, this is the ECMWF chart for this morning, and you can see here an area of low pressure, rather vigorous low, crossing Ontario into Quebec, and eventually tonight it'll be bringing wind and rain across the maritime regions of Canada. On the backside, we're seeing some very chilly air temperatures north of Lake Nipigon, or down in -6 Celsius, which was 21 Fahrenheit. So the coldest morning of the autumn so far here. I do believe there was reports of some snow over the northern half of Ontario as well. Temperatures into the Arrowhead of Minnesota dropped into the 20s this morning, as well as northern Wisconsin as well. So chillier nonetheless, and that chill, of course, came with some beautiful skies. This was the weatherbug cam of out of Madison, Wisconsin. So beautiful, beautiful sunrise this morning here as a result of that cool air coming out of Canada. Clear, dry air, just fabulous conditions. But as for this weekend, we're talking about, of course, Usagi. Once a super typhoon, winds in excess of 160 miles an hour. This is an IR image when the system peaked in intensity, down to, I believe, around 922 millibars. It is the strongest tropical cyclone globally this year so far, and that pushed into the Gunghang province of China to the north of Hong Kong this morning, producing some tremendous winds, storm surge, and of course flood and rain as a result. But the good news is that system was roughly around 160 miles to the north of Hong Kong, home to some 15 million people. That's roughly around the population of Greater New York City, as to get an idea of the population and the size of the city. But certainly, over the past 23 years, this city is certainly no stranger to tropical cyclones. Some 75 systems, including Usagi, has impacted Hong Kong since 1990. So that's to give you a rough idea the activity tropical-wise in this part of the world. But certainly this was a picture tweeted by Rob Speda. He's a meteorologist out of Tokyo in Japan, and he tweeted this picture from Santau, I believe it is pronounced, and this is a region that was within the front right quadrant of the eye as it came ashore. So not only hurricane force winds in excess of 100 miles an hour, but also the severe storm surge and coastal flooding as a result of this. So a messy day over eastern parts of China and even Hong Kong itself. The eye itself actually dropped south after making landfall, so I do believe the conditions did worsen over Hong Kong over the course of this afternoon and this evening. But the track is very different to Manyi. It, of course, crossed Japan, headed up, affecting the South Korea Peninsula, and of course, it sent the trough over eastern North America over this weekend. But you can see here, Usagi crossed a more due west path into China. And as a result, folks, that's going to have an impact over the eastern half of North America through the upcoming, or the latter stages of the upcoming week. As a matter of fact, we are going to see the opposite. As opposed to the recurve, we're seeing that west track. It sends a ridge over the northern half of the United States. So the northern tier, the east, we'll start to see a ridge pump north. So we're already seeing the results of the heat building over the Great Basin. That will push into the plain states through the middle half of the week. And as we progress towards the second half of the week, we're going to see high pressure building, heat getting lifted north into Ontario, Quebec, and it depends on this upper level low over the Maritimes of Canada whether we're going to see that heat push all the way into the I-95 corridor towards next weekend. So this is the chart of the ECMWF for next weekend. So this is next Saturday, and this would correlate well with a non-recurving super typhoon Usagi into China. So very interesting to see the correlation, the difference between a recurve and a non-recurving system over the West Pacific. And as a result, the 6 to 10 day correlates very well with that ridge of high pressure. Warm temperatures over the northern tier, the northeast as well. So the model here, the GFS, is indicating that the ridge really drives that heat all the way into the northeastern half of the US. Now, interestingly enough, while Usagi makes landfall in eastern China, we've got Pabuk, which is a developing typhoon at the moment over the West Pacific. And you can see here off the Joint Typhoon Warning Center that the track goes in a recurve fashion. So we're going to see another recurving typhoon over the West Pacific. Now, the JTWC indicates that it stays off Japan, so it isn't going to impact Japan. However, the ECMWF says otherwise. This is the 192 hour of the ECMWF hinting at a fairly vigorous system. Now, I don't think this is going to become a super typhoon. The reason being is, folks, that it's not going to interact with the water temperatures that Usagi did. Now, this is Taiwan and this is the Philippines. Water temperatures here are generally among the warmest globally, and Usagi passed through the gap between Taiwan and the Philippines and interacted with the warmest temperatures found anywhere in any tropical basin globally, and that was what allowed the system to become a super typhoon. This system, Pabuk, is going to stay well away from that core of heat, and of course, according to the ECMWF, get mighty close to Japan. And as a result, we should be paying attention to this. If you live in Tokyo, if you live, across the island, you need to be paying attention to this here, folks. Still a long way out, and there is models indicating that there is a cold front that will be sliding east off the Asian continent, crossing Japan, and ultimately keeping this system off the Japanese coast. But it depends on the progression, the speed of this frontal boundary pushing off the Asian continent. That will dictate how quickly that recurve occurs. But you can see here, by the time we get to 240 hours, this is 10 days away, it's speeding and accelerating north towards the Korean Peninsula, towards the North Pacific. And as a result, you'll be looking at that 6 to 10 day rule of an eastern trough over North America. And lo and behold, by the time we get out to Tuesday, the 1st of October, so this is a week on Tuesday, there's a pretty significant and deeper trough dropping into the upper Midwest, the Great Lakes, and eventually the Northeast, and chilly air will be getting driven down. You notice here that 850 temperatures aren't overly cold here, but it certainly will be worth paying attention to this. This is some 10 days away, so a long time to be looking, but it will be interesting to see just how deep the trough is that comes down as a somewhat an indirect consequence to that system over the West Pacific. Now, I say an indirect consequence, folks, because we are going to be seeing some other drivers in play at this point. And this is by the time we get out to Wednesday, the 2nd of October. So this is 10 days, very deep upper level trough, sitting right over the over Lake Erie, in fact. But you notice here the front gets all the way down towards North Florida. So it's chillier, drier, getting all the way down in towards the north half of Florida, the Gulf Coast of Alabama as well. So another shot of chilly air coming down. Now, this is the GFS ensembles for not only the NAO, the PNA, but also the Arctic Oscillation as well. And look at this here, folks. It's very, very adamant that this thing is going into the tank, going down towards the values of -2, -3. You can notice here, if you look all the way back to the 1st of June, we have not seen anything like this since really March of last year. So the GFS for the best part of a solid week now has been very, very adamant that this thing is going into the tank. So while we've got that recurving typhoon over the West Pacific, we've also got a negative NAO setting up. So we're going to start to see high pressure build over the North Atlantic, over the Davis Straits. That would correlate very nicely with a trough over the eastern half of North America. Now, the PNA, the Pacific North America pattern, is indicating that it's negative. It is generally neutral now. It will go into the negative territory, and of course we've got a trough dropping into the western half of the United States, driving cooler down. We've seen pictures of snow over the Squaw Valley of California yesterday. Looks as if we're going to see a deeper trough coming down. That's going to force remember we've got Usagi that's dropped into China. That of course will correlate well with the eastern part of North America with the ridge. But we've got that deep trough over the western half of the United States. So it correlates very well with the negative PNA. But you notice here by the time we get into the early part of October, it's going positive. So therefore indicating that we see a ridge developing over the western half of the continent, and therefore tying in lovely with the NAO, a nice trough over the eastern half of North America. And finally, the Arctic Oscillation, yes, it's going into the negative. It's already in the negative. It's supposed to be going up towards positive. But if it was to stay negative at the same time that the NAO goes negative and the PNA goes positive, the question I would be asking is, could Arctic air get driven into the trough into the eastern half of North America, and therefore would see much colder air? That is very much open to question. It's still a long way out. We're only at the 22nd of September, so a lot of things can change here. But it will be very interesting to see after the ridge comes into the east, that trough that comes down, how much cold comes down with it? That is the big question. It will be interesting to see that. Now, since the middle part of August, I have been saying that the US, the eastern half of the US and the western half of Europe should see a cold October. So a lot of things to look at, a lot of things we're paying attention to. If you haven't already signed up to markvoganweather.com, please give it a go. Going to be looking much, much more in detail to the winter forecast coming up. That will be at the end of October. But stay ahead of the forecast, stay ahead of the weather, and hope you can sign up for a very, very good price. Also, if you haven't already done so, you can follow me at Twitter at Mark Vogan and on Facebook as well. Bye for now.